Okay, this is the bottom of the board. I have marked out where the fin reinforcements are going to be, which is right here, right here. I'm going to freehand the end. I've got this template which allows for the width of the router. I've set the router bit to 1/4 of an inch deep, and I'm going to route the channel for the rails. Okay, so the edges are done, and you can see that the groove is offset from the template that I was using, because I have adjusted it by the width of the disc of the bottom of the router. Okay, so there's the routing all done. I've got some grooves, some deeper areas where the screws are going to go through on the fins, and some shallow areas just to give a little, I'm going to add a little more strength where the fins get squeezed down. I freehanded the end, but the edges were done with a template because it's just a little bit easier for final shaping to have nice smooth lines. You'll notice I also didn't have quite a big enough piece of foam, so I just used some epoxy to do a butt end join, and I've just got a small piece tacked on each end so it's symmetrical. Okay, so I'm going to mix up the resin. I am using a digital scale, measuring by the gram. It's by far the best way to measure ratios. I am using micro balloons, which these ones are white, and I'm also using some 1/8 inch milled fibers and some white pigment. I'm going to mix them all in with the resin for pouring the rails. And I'm going to mix up about just over 200 grams of mixed resin and hardener to do the rails on this board. And the rails are, the groove is about 1 centimeter wide, or 3/8 of an inch wide, and it's about 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch deep, plus the slots for where the fins are going to go. So that should be enough once I've used the fill. Okay, here's the resin mixed up. It's got to be able to flow still to pour it. That could be a little thicker maybe, but I probably had, in this size container, I must have put about 2 centimeters worth of micro balloons over the whole top surface before it got mixed in. And the chopped fibers was probably between 2 and 3 golf ball sized clumps of fibers that got mixed in there as well, so we'll try that. Okay, so I just poured it, and there's the bottom of the board now. We've got spaces or spots where the fins will be able to sit with a little bit more structure. And I made sure I filled them right up, so if anything slightly bulging up, it's easier to shave it down than to have to fill a little more later. And that was exactly 210 grams of resin for a 136 by 43. Okay, so this is cured up now. I use a Surform, which is a thing like this, looks kind of like a cheese grater. I use that to just shave this all down so that it's nice and flush with the board when I'm doing it. Try and keep it more to the outside so you don't chew up the inside as much. Try and have it on the outside. And now we've just got to cut this out with a regular saw. And when I say regular saw, I just mean a regular wood saw. Okay, so the board is cut out, but you'll notice that I have left a little bit of foam all the way around the edges outside of the rail, and that'll be cut off after the board is glassed. It's easier to trim the glass at the end if there's a little bit of foam that separates the finished rail. So for now we just leave a little bit all the way around, and I'm going to use this Surform again just to tidy it up so I have a fairly even amount of foam all the way around, and that way it'll just help me with my shaping for tapering the rails. Okay, so this is the bottom of the board, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to route the top to expose the rail material. And so I've got a router table that I'm using here, although you can certainly do it by hand with a router. What I'm going to do is just go all the way around the edge with the router bit set up just enough to take off about 1/3 of this foam, because the poured rails go in about 2/3 of the way in here. Okay, so this is looking at the top of the board now. Let me just grab the light. So you can see I've taken off a little bit. There's a look at the edge now. So I've exposed the rail that I poured, and now I'm going to taper the tips to adjust the flex of the board. Okay, so to taper the tips, I'm going to use this jig that I made here with the router. So the router just sits on top of this jig, and I can move this jig around. The trick with this is that it's a piece of wood that sits on top of the board. This sits near the middle of the board. This is sitting at the end here, and it's just sort of got a bit of a step, so it sits on the board like this. So when I put my router on, you can see if I've got the blade set right, at the tip, when it's further forward here, the router's just touching, so it's going to fade away my tip to nothing there. And down here it's going to cut it. It's going to cut all of this off and take it right down to the level I was already at there. So I've just got to do a bunch of passes, move the jig along, and I'm just going to do that at the end of the board here. Okay, oh, I'll take off my mask here. So that's half done. You can see where I've done two, it goes very quickly. And I've exposed where the screws are going to go through for the fins. I'm only tapering the tips. I'm not actually going to taper the sides, although I could, but I want to keep this core as thick as possible because I'm already starting off very thin. Okay, so both ends are now tapered. So we start off like this. I've got a step along the rails of which I'm going to have to tidy up because I can't glass something that's sharp. But I'm going to keep the thickness at the rails here, and it tapers out. I've got to do a bit of sanding. I'll use a Surform first and then a bit of sandpaper. That's actually very, very thin, but I just got to tidy up that end there. And on that board in the background is extremely old and getting stripped down for parts. Okay, so I beveled my edges a little bit where the rail steps down, so it's sort of a 45-degree angle now. I'm going to keep the rest of the board thick at the full 3/8 of an inch since it's only 3/8 of a core. And it's been about a half an hour shaping since it started off as a rectangle. And now I'm going to look at where I put my inserts. Okay, I've marked off where the inserts are going to go. And these are the inserts that I'm using. These are from snowboardmaterials.com. It's actually got a clear plastic cap on top. And it's a stainless steel thing, 6mm head or 6mm thread, and you just got to set your router to the exact depth here. And then I've got these hexagonal things. I'm gonna just put a small router bit in and just route out 6 holes. It'll just take a few minutes, and then we're gonna epoxy them in. Okay, so I'm just putting the inserts in now. I'm putting them in with the same kind of mixture. Now that's not done yet. That one needs more resin. I'm putting them in with the same mixture of mostly microballoons, but a bit of fibers too. And the idea, you just put a little resin in, drop the insert in, and fill around it. Make sure it's nice and smooth because it's a lot easier to make it smooth when it's liquid than when it's hard, and you don't want to damage the little plastic cap that keeps the resin out of the threads. Okay, so the resin around the inserts is cured, and I just sanded anything that didn't come out smooth. You can see also there's holes all over the board. I've drilled holes, perforated the core. Same thing on the bottom. You can see the holes going right through. You can see where the inserts are as well. I've sanded all the way around the rails and where the fins go with 50 grit sandpaper to make it nice and smooth. And not just smooth, I shouldn't say, but to leave it so that there's a good coarse scrapes that the resin can bond into. The holes are just to let resin flow through and let air get out when we vacuum bag the core down.